All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shah Bahashem, Rakakwadash. Double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples towards younger brothers. And peace and blessings and salutation to the hopeful lake out there pushing his word in truth and in sincerity across the four winds. In the name of Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shah Bahashem, Rakakadash, pushing to get up out of here. Shalom to the hopeful elect, the believers, the listeners who have came back to the obedience of the scriptures through faith in Yahweh Bashem Al Shai. All right. And I want to go into a lesson, centered around, the importance, of obedience, and Yahweh Shai, he was that example, okay, of obedience. You see, when you go into Yahweh Shai, his life, it was centered around his obedience to the Father. Okay, his life was geared towards being obedient unto death. Okay, and as we know, he was perfect in the law. Okay, but also he stuck to the assignment, because Yahweh Shai was sent on a specific assignment. There was things, even beyond the law, okay, that Yahweh Shai fulfilled. When you go into a prophecy, okay, there was certain things required of him, okay, that was prophesied. And for order for him to fulfill prophecy, well, he had to be obedient. Okay? So Yahweh Shai fulfilled the law, all right, the obedience of the law. Okay, and he was obedient to the purpose of his calling. Okay, and what we're learning, there's a purpose that we have as the sons of God, as we claim, all right, to be Israelites. Well, being the Israelite is not about being, chosen for the sake of being chosen. No, we're chosen for a purpose. All right, we're chosen, okay, to be the standard of obedience in the earth. Okay, so we're not just chosen, a chosen people, okay, for the sake of being chosen. No, there's a responsibility that comes with being chosen. Okay, and this captivity is teaching us the obedient aspect, okay, of being chosen. Okay, and Yahweh Shai, he learned the obedient aspect, of his office. All right, being, the head, okay, of the nation of Israel, being the only begotten Son. Okay, the responsibility that he has. All right, as a righteous ruler, where he learned that obedience. All right, he was perfected in obedience in his last, and during his last reincarnation. Okay, as Yahweh Shai. You see, and now that we are in our last, reincarnation before we're perfected, we're learning obedience. You see, we're learning the responsibility that comes with, all right, being the sons of God. Now, when we go to Hebrews 12:1, it says, "Wherefore, seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witness, let us lay aside every weight and sin which doth so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us." Okay, and we have a race, okay, and we're racing to be perfected through what? Rehearsing the righteous acts through faith. You know, constantly putting off that old man, constantly dying to this world and being alive in your house. Well, this is the race. That's the marathon we on. And this journey, this marathon is meant to transform us, okay, into sons, all right, of righteous, man. You know, this journey, you see, that we're on is transforming us to being righteous and being perfect without power. Beginning, with the men, you few sisters as well. This journey, is all about us, being perfected. Okay, as the children of the Most High and righteous, man, and righteousness. You see, so it said, put off the things that so easily beset us, man. Anything that's a hindrance in us serving our power, okay, and us sticking to the assignment that we've been given in the heavens. See, we have an assignment that was given to us in the heavens. You see, we have a purpose, that, if you're not of, the hopeful leg, you can't see it. Okay, and someone is not of the hopeful elect, well, they're designed by default, is to throw us off. That's why scriptures speak about, when being around the indiscreet, observe the time. Okay, when we're amongst those that don't have the vision, that don't have the understanding, well, it's only so long we can be around them because we have a purpose and assignment. They don't, and they can't see it. You see, we're not here to make them see it. We teach, and the elect gonna get it. Okay, so anything or anyone that's a hindrance, okay, or that's trying to, be a distraction to the mission. Well, look, we set those things aside. All right, so we can focus on the race that's at hand. Okay, when you go to verse 2, it said, looking unto Yahweh, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of the Most High. Okay, so Yahweh, he was that great example. Okay, that's why the scriptures call him what? The author, which we always go into it. The author of our faith. Okay, Yahweh laid down the blueprint of what the Heavenly Father expects. Now it was on him to be perfect in the law so he can be that blameless sacrifice, man. Okay, and he, which that was his lot. It's not our lot to be perfect in the law, but our lot is to be obedient, okay, to our calling, even unto death. As Yahweh was obedient to his calling, even unto death, okay? Because there's no law against him, calling down legions to defend himself, you see, when he was going on the cross, okay? But he would have been disobedient to the assignment, you see? So just as, um, we all have our assignment in the faith and the truth, man, okay, that requires that daily obedience, man, even unto death, where Yahweh he showed that perfect example of that, man. It was bigger than him. It's one of the main things Yahweh taught us, that this is bigger than us, man. He understood that it was bigger than him. Okay? And if our king, our great king, Yahweh can have, the awareness of understanding that, obedience, okay, because the obedience, when we show obedience, we show that we understand that it's bigger than us and our personal interest. You see, Yahweh showed that, the Most High's will, okay, was bigger than his personal interest, man. You see, and this is what we're learning. So you go into this word in the Greek.
Strong's G 747. Archegas. Archegas.
Archegas. It says the chief leader, all right, the prince. Definition 2, it says one that takes the lead in anything and thus affords an example, a predecessor in a matter, a pioneer. Okay, a pioneer. So Yahweh Shah was the pioneer, a predecessor of how we should be. He was the forerunner. Okay, he set the example, okay, of how we should be when it came to obedience, man. You see, and that's part of us following the Lamb whithersoever he goes. We follow the Lamb, through obedience, man. You see, that's the main way we follow, all right, the Lamb Yahweh Shai is through obedience. When you go to Hebrews 5, okay, and 8, all right, and read this in the KJV and the NLT, it says, though he were a son, yet learned he obedience by the things which he suffered. Okay, let's see, let's get this word obedience. He learned obedience through suffering. Okay, you get this word obedience.
Strong's G 5218. Upaka A. Upaka A.
Upakue. All right, when you go into it, is where obedience, compliance, submission. Okay, obedience, compliance, and submission. You see? So Yahweh Shah fully submitted to the will of the Father. As Adam, he didn't fully submit. As King Solomon, he didn't fully submit. You see? But as Yahweh Shah, he fully submitted to the Lord's will. You see? And we're, in this time, all right, we're learning to be fully submitted to the Lord's will. And there's a suffering that goes into that, and that suffering is making us perfect, man. You know, and we're in the kingdom where we can suffer. Okay, we gotta deal with betrayal, setbacks. Okay, being the outcast. Okay, being mocked for obedience. Okay, but that process is making us perfect. Yahweh Shai, when he completed that process and he's perfected. Okay, that's why, real quick, let's read this in NLT. Then we're gonna jump Hebrews 5:9. It says, even though Yahweh Shai was the Most High sons, he learned obedience from the things he suffered. Okay, so the suffering of doing right in a wicked society, well, that process is making us perfect without power. Okay, when we disregard our personal interest for the sake of obedience, well, constantly going through that process on the day to day is making us perfect, man. It's perfecting us, man. Hebrews 2:10. All right, it said, for it became him for whom are all things, Yahweh Shai, and by whom are all things, and bringing many sons. Okay, being there with that pioneer, that author of our faith. All right, by being an example for us to follow. You see, Yahweh Shai left a blueprint. You see, when you study Yahweh Shai life, his mannerisms, okay, his decision making, okay, and you really study those things, man, and go into these things through the volume of the book. Well, he left a blueprint on us, all right, for us on how to be. Okay, it says, and by whom are all things, and bringing many sons unto glory, to make the captain of their salvation perfect through suffering. You see? Perfect through suffering, man. So Yahweh Shai, and right, he learned suffering. I mean, he learned obedience through the suffering. He was perfected through the suffering, man. We're going through the same process, man. And it's not a comfortable process. You see, the process ain't comfortable, okay? But the process, okay, is perfecting us, man. You see? Which is leading to what? An eternal salvation, an eternal reward. Okay, a temporary suffering is leading to an eternal reward, man. Okay, and it's perfecting us. We're going to be perfect with our power. Okay, we're going to be in good standings with our power forever. We're going to be in favor with our power forever, man. Blessed by our power forever. You see? When we read this in the NLT, it said, the Most High, for whom and through whom everything was made, we're going to Yahweh Shai, chose to bring many children into glory, and it was only right that he should make Yahweh Shai through his suffering. Okay, and it was only right that he should make Yahweh Shai through his suffering a perfect leader fit to bring them into their salvation. Okay, so now Yahweh Shai is perfected for his office, man. To deliver the rest of the nation and reign as a king and Lord of lords forever, man. And we're gonna reign in our lot, all right, with him, okay, after we're perfected. You see, Yahweh Shai is coming to deliver those who are perfected through suffering, man. You see? To reign with him forever, man. Hebrews 5:8 says in the NLT, even though Yahweh Shai was the Most High Son, he learned obedience from the things he suffered. In this way, the Most High qualified him as a perfect high priest, and he became the source. You see that? The source of eternal salvation for all those who obey him. Okay, so Yahweh Shai became the source of eternal salvation through all that obey him. Okay, so Yahweh Shai left us that blueprint to follow. Okay, to be selfless. Okay, to be kingdom minded. You see, to be brotherly. All right, to be occupied in the will of the Lord. Know that I not should I be know that I not be about my father's business. That's a hard statement, man. That's a statement to live by. Being about the father's business, that statement alone is a statement to live by, man. Well, Yahweh Shai told to his parents that they was looking for him, man. Okay? So yeah, man, following Yahweh Shai is leading to the eternal glory, and it's leading us to being perfected, man, through the suffering, man. So that's the point. Just wanted to get into that. Lord will, you brothers. All right, and you feel so edified. Till next time, say shalom, Kwam Yashala, Abba soon, shalom.